Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today it is time to preview all 13 games in Week 7. We got 6 teams on bye. Maybe, just maybe we'll keep this pod to around 90 minutes, but who the hell knows? As always, I am joined by none other than PFF senior analyst Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Dwain, this is like our third time talking to each other in the last 36 hours. How are you?
Ian, I love you, man. I love you. That's all I have to say. No, what? This slate is it's very interesting. I mean, we've got multiple games on here where you've got a 17.5 favorite, a 15.5 favorite, a 9.5 favorite. I'm like, man, this is these all look like blowouts on paper. We got a few competitive games, so it's. I started working on my projections earlier, and I was like, wow, this is the toughest week so far. There's fewer people. There's a lot of really good players on bye, but man, I just started looking. I was like, I have this guy at 37. I got to double check this.
When I was doing my running back article, I couldn't believe how many times that it was well, I guess this guy is going to be an RB2 because so many damn teams are on bye. So keep that in mind. And yeah, I think more times than ever this week, people will be viable fantasy options depending on the league. So let's get right into it. As always, I'm going to take the away team. Dwayne's going to take the home team. We'll try to get through every fantasy relevant player, but truly just trying to give you more than anything, one really good actionable fantasy nugget ahead of Sunday. We're recording this on a Tuesday. Still have a little bit more time to hash out our full thoughts. So starting things off with Thursday Night Football, Broncos at the Browns. Cleveland opened up as 4.5 point favorites, as down to 3.5. Game total is at 42, down from 44. So I am really concerned about Myles Garrett and company basically ending this one before it can even get going, because the Broncos, not a fantastic offensive line, but with Teddy holding the ball so long, it really just compounds the issue. Because overall, they're 29th in pressure rate. One of the cool things we can do behind the scenes at PFF, though, is see what's that pressure rate when the quarterback gets rid of the ball in under 2.5 seconds, which is usually the threshold we're using to determine a quick or slow release. They dropped down to 19th in that era. The problem is Teddy Bridgewater happens to have the 9th slowest release time in the league through 6 weeks. So Myles Garrett and the Browns, number 1 in pressure rate. This is going to be bad, people. You can check out my mismatch manifesto on PFF.com every Thursday. I would be shocked if this is not shaping up to be the single worst offensive line versus defensive line pressure matchup of the week. So with that said, I do think we need to get behind Courtland Sutton once again. Not sure if Jerry Jeudy's going to be back for this one just yet. Seems like, I don't know, man. It could make more sense if you give him the extra long week after this one to truly get right. Either way, Courtland Sutton, we know he's going to get his chances. The question is, can Teddy get the ball near him? Because Sutton leads the NFL in air yards, but here's the thing, people. Not all air yards are created equal, and I tried to figure out a way how to quantify this and basically describe these quote-unquote prayer yards. Someone on Twitter suggested I call them sheesh yards, which I also love. But basically, looking at incompletions that were deemed to be the quarterback's fault, overthrown, underthrown, thrown to a defender. We have about 7 different categories like this on PFF. So the top 5 guys in these prayer yards this year: Courtland Sutton by far number 1, DJ Moore 2, Devontae Adams 3, MVS 4, Robbie Anderson 5. If you look at the advanced stats, you will be surprised to see that Aaron Rodgers has been pretty terrible throwing downfield, at least in this 6-game sample to start the year. So Courtland Sutton, I posted a video on my Twitter before I came here today of not 1, not 2, 4 opportunities that I thought with a better ball he could have had chunk gains, if not touchdowns. It's unfortunate it went the way it did, but again, with Teddy under center, and if Teddy's not going to be under center, eventually Drew Lock's going to be under center. That's just life in the Denver Broncos offense. So we're feeling good enough about Sutton. I still think he's, especially this week, going to be an upside wide receiver too. In the backfield, I want Javonte Williams to get freed. You want Javonte Williams to get freed. Melvin Gordon is still a perfectly fine real-life running back, so we're going to need to hold off on crowning him just yet. But, Dwayne, when we put together these rankings tomorrow night and tomorrow morning, or I guess tonight and tomorrow morning, I wouldn't be surprised to see Gordon and Javonte cracking that low-end RB2 range. So they're fine. They're going up against the Browns D that I think they'll be able to have moderate success running the ball, but there's just only so much any running back can do with 12 to 15 carries and targets per game. That's all they're going to see as long as they're both splitting work pretty much right down the middle. Now, Dwayne, with the Browns, we got injuries all over the place. Beckham hasn't practiced this week with the shoulder. We got Jarvis Landry still uncertain with the knee. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt ruled out. Baker Mayfield apparently is going to keep playing through this completely torn labrum. So out of all this going on, Who the hell can we depend on with the Cleveland Browns offense this Thursday night?
Yeah, I think the big thing that most folks probably want to know about Ian is Dearness Johnson and Demetric Felton. So just looking at Felton, he's only lined up in the backfield, for 2 snaps. He started off there and gone ghost motion outside, like 6 times. So I really wouldn't count on much out of Felton. I do think he'll be a movable chess piece, like they'll move him around. But I think to expect anything like what we were getting out of Kareem Hunt in that role, which is originally kind of where my head went, but as I dug deeper into the data and really looked at it, because I started thinking, I was like, man, there hasn't been a lot of Felton on the field with these other 2 backs. So I had to go back and look at preseason and some other things. And I'm just not very confident. I do believe that it will be Dearness Johnson handling probably 60 to 70%, of the work. So he's going to give you a good spot start. It's not the greatest matchup ever, against the Broncos, but it is a good offensive line for the Browns. You got Odell Beckham Jr. going to have to watch on the injury report. You got Jarvis Landry potentially coming back. But as you mentioned, you've got an injured quarterback who's going to be playing through the injury. It's almost like you wonder if they should just go with Case Keenum, for a bit at this point. So it's hard to get real excited, about those players. But I will say I've got Odell Beckham Jr. right now sitting inside my top 30 just because of all the bye weeks, like what we talked about. So he's sitting there right there on the line. And then if Jarvis Landry plays, he's probably going to come in somewhere right around, matchup 40. They both have okay matchups as far as the wide receiver cornerbacks and the strength of schedule, but not great. So it really looks like a game that I want to try to avoid if I can. I know that's tougher, to do on a week where you've got all these bye weeks. But just looking at it, I'm like this matchup, I just don't like it. It feels like a low-scoring Thursday night affair.
Stefanski did say in his Tuesday press conference, Beckham and Jarvis both have a chance to suit up for this one of the more important injury situations to watch this week. Chiefs at the Titans, Kansas City sitting as 4.5-point favorites. Game total week high 56.5, expecting all sorts of points to be scored. And why not? I'm sure you all watched that entertaining shootout between the Titans and the Bills on Monday night. But sticking to the Chiefs side of the ball, oh man, Dwayne, we were kind of complaining about this Sunday night, I think it was, with Darrell Williams basically getting the role that we hoped that, the first round running back they took, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, might get at some point. So Darrell Williams last week, 72% snaps, 21 carries, and 4 targets. Over the last 2 weeks, Darrell Williams has 9 targets. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has 10 targets this entire season. Clyde has not had more than 3 targets in a game since week 14 of last year. Like the fact that they drafted him in large part because seemingly of his pass down goodness, only to really give Darrell those real opportunities once he's sidelined. It's just infuriating. Dwayne, I think he brought up how similar to in 2019 when Josh Jacobs got hurt at the end of the year, all of a sudden they feed DeAndre Washington the full down workload that we wanted Jacobs to have in the first place. So it's frustrating. That's why we were a little bit more down on Darrell compared to some of these other running backs last week. And I do think the game script has something to do with it. We shouldn't expect to see Darrell eclipsing 20 carries more weeks than not. With that said, if we can get between 3 and 5 targets and 12 to 15 carries in anyone's idea of a top 5 scoring offense, that's going to be great for fantasy business. So again, not expecting the Chiefs to just blow out the Titans here. It does seem like it'll be a back and forth game if the spread and the game total indicate anything, but it's going to be hard to keep him with all these buys, anything, lower than a borderline RB1. So Titans 24th ranked scoring defense. We're really not afraid of them at all. Run game, pass game. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, Tyreek Hill is if you just take wide receivers and tight ends and combine them, Tyreek Hill is the second highest scoring receiver. Travis Kelce is the 10th highest. I mean, the way Mahomes just condenses everything around them truly is a sight to be seen. Mecole, Pringle, DeMarcus, Josh Gordon, your pick is probably as good as mine. I would go with Mecole. We did see him actually make a nice downfield catch last week. Of course, Robinson ends up being the one that got the touchdown later. Could have even been Pringle. At this point, it just all kind of blends together with these complementary targets. So if you have to do, a shot in the dark, I do think Mecole gives you the best chance among these guys at leading the way in targets, but you're certainly not feeling good about that. Dwayne, we really had people, not just people. It seems like the whole fantasy community was out on A.J. Brown after 3.5 rough quarters to start the year. Thankfully, our king reminded everyone what he's capable of in the second half of that Monday night shootout.
Yeah, you don't quit A.J. Brown. You just let him quit you. That's how that works. Like you just keep going with it, man. But yeah, showed up with 7 receptions on 9 targets for 91 yards. Was looking, he was looking more A.J. Brown-esque, let's say, towards the end of the game. You also had Julio Jones leave. Julio actually made a couple of nice plays, so it really, I hated to see him pull up lame again with the hamstring thing. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. And then so we had Nick Westbrook-Ikhine getting back out there a little bit. I think I said the name right, Ian. I went ahead and attempted it.
Yes, I was watching the broadcast, and I heard them pronounce the name, and I was like, oh, we know now. We can pronounce the whole name. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine.
So you know what, you say that, and I've thought about that. I was like, I need, when I'm rewatching these games, because most of the time I watch the all 22 because the way we have our setup, So when I used to watch the condensed versions, right, I would hear the names more often, and so I would know these pronunciations. And I was thinking, that's a thing that's missing from my process right now, is actually hearing the announcers say some of these names, unless I catch it on Red Zone or whatever on the weekend. So yeah, I'm glad that you caught it, so we can confirm, because that was a complete guess. So Dwayne, I thought I'd give it a whirl.
This is what we got to start doing. Like, you know how apparently like people can still like learn stuff as they're sleeping when they're playing stuff like throughout their ears. We just need to like put headphones on when we go to bed. Just have like NFL Game Pass rolling, and like we'll just, when we wake up the next day, suddenly we'll know how to pronounce all these guys.
You know how it is on Mondays and Tuesdays. I feel like that's probably about the only way I would be able to squeeze it in, is through that sort of a process. But man, Derrick Henry this week, obviously nobody needs me to say, hey, start Derrick Henry, but I got to point out, running back strength of schedule, the top one of the week, a perfect 10, which is based on PFF grades and metrics. So it's not just something where we're saying, hey, the fantasy points given up to a back. This is truly about the defense they're playing against, how does their defensive line grade, their front seven, all those different things. And so Derrick Henry has the best matchup of the week against the Chiefs. Offensive line run blocking advantage is a plus 66, which is second best on the slate. So we've got King Henry with the number 1 RBSOS, with the number 2 offensive line run blocking on the slate. So it's going to be a big week for Henry. We just have to make sure they don't fall behind by too much. But the way the Chiefs have played lately, now the Chiefs could do this any moment, but the way that they've played is not like they've just been dominating teams. Yes, they did eventually get out by a pretty big lead, against Washington, but Tennessee is a lot better team than Washington, and I would expect them to be able to hang around in this game with their offense, with Henry and A.J. Brown.
Final note, just to echo what you're saying about this being the single best matchup of the week for a run game. I mentioned this on another podcast, but cool stat we have PFF behind the scenes. Average depth of tackle, top 3 defenses, all under 3.5 yards, Saints, Buccaneers, and football team. Bottom 3 defenses, Chargers and Texans over 5, and the Chiefs at number 30, 4.93 yards of average depth on the tackle. You give Derrick Henry 5 yards of runway, Dwayne, I think that could be just a little bit problematic.
Can you imagine, who wants to really tackle Derrick Henry head on? I would much rather be a sideline-to-sideline linebacker. I would be a sideline-to-sideline linebacker no matter what kind of linebacker I was. If I was facing Derrick Henry, I'd be like, sorry, coach, you got a good angle on me. Had to take him from the side. Had to chase him down 7 yards later.
God,
I also still didn't get him down. He just kept going.
I think it was Hyde last night. There was some early run. I think it was a 15-yarder where you heard the announcer mid-play just be like, he's got to make a business decision right here. And,
I give Hyde credit on that. He stood in there. He did not make the business decision. He stayed in there. He stayed in there on it. Man, that's got to be a frightening moment when that freight train's coming at you.
Absolutely terrifying. Washington football team at the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay sitting as 9.5-point home favorites. Game total resting at 49. So Heineke, McLaurin, we've seen some flashes from this offense, but at this point, how banged up they are, I just think it's really tough to expect them to get much going in this spot. We got Sam Cosmi, their tackle, missed week 6 with an ankle injury. Brandon Scherf hasn't played since week 4 due to a knee injury. Obviously, Terry McLaurin threw all of us in the loop last week with the late week hamstring addition. He played through the pain last week. Curtis Samuel, their high-price free agent addition, has barely even practiced since joining the team with a groin issue. They tried to trot him out there for a few weeks, too limited, re-aggravated it. He's very unlikely to suit up this week. Cam Sims, another backup receiver, has missed the last 2 games with a hamstring injury, and now we have Antonio Gibson playing at far less than 100%, seemingly worse off by the week with that shin injury, and we're even hearing about maybe a calf issue as well. So J.D. McKissic at this point, here we are, Dwayne, only week 7, but J.D. McKissic is probably the safest play in this offense other than our guy, Ricky Seals-Jones. So you can check out the Tuesday edition of this podcast to hear our full tight end waiver wire thoughts. But spoiler, go get Ricky Seals-Jones if he is available as one of the few true every down tight ends that is actually a good pass catcher available in fantasy land. So J.D. McKissic, while this is an odd number week, he typically only goes off on even numbers. We're still looking at a spot as a 9.5-point dog. Likely going to be facing extreme negative game script. And with Gibson playing so banged up, man, we could just see the carries move forward a lot too. Like, Dwayne, I do think Jarrett Patterson, if Gibson's out, I think Jarrett Patterson comes in and takes a lot of these carries. Are we underestimating how involved McKissic could be, though? It would not be the weirdest thing we've seen. We just talked about Darrell Williams getting Clyde's role and DeAndre Washington a couple years ago. We have evidence of Ron Rivera talking. Now, he's compared Gibson and McKissic, and I want to say even another guy to Christian McCaffrey. So he might just be pulling that comparison out of his ass all the time. There's a non-zero chance, though. If Gibson misses time, that McKissic just becomes an 80% workworkhorse. It could happen.
It could happen. I mean, we've seen some of these things. You know, he doesn't necessarily have the body type, so I can't imagine them wanting to just bang him between the tackles like that, you know, for a game, especially if they think that Antonio Gibson could be out for some period of time.
It could be like an Eckler role, though.
Yeah, no, I think he could definitely play the Eckler type role. I've got him at RB20 right now in my first pass for the week. So I've got him in my 4th tier. I've got Jarrett Patterson in tier 5 just because of what you just said. I do expect Patterson to take over a bigger portion of what Gibson is leaving behind, but I think what McKissic adds to what he's already doing, and I feel like if the game gets in a crunch, if they get down by a ton of points, which you just mentioned, they're 9.5-point dogs in the game, there's a lot of paths here for by the time we get to halftime, we're like, where's Jarrett Patterson? I don't know. Who's Jarrett Patterson? I don't know who he is. Like, I feel like this could be completely the McKissic show by halftime. But it is the Packers. The Packers do weird things. Like, they kind of, they'll mess around in the first half, but they have been leading these bad teams in the late in the second half, which has been why we've seen so much AJ, Dillon recently from their side. So yeah, I've got McKissic right now in my top 20. That's my first pass at it. I just finished it before the show started. I've only graded my top 30 backs, and so he's inside of that.
J.D. McKissic, do not sleep on the man. Yeah, the only reason I really bring that up, I was doing my running back article and just realized last week, even with Gibson in and out of the lineup, Patterson only ends up with 1 carry. McKissic ends up with 8. And, going back and watching this game, they weren't just one continued scat back sweep after another. They're at least comfortable from time to time giving McKissic carries in between the tackles. So only other note I would say is keep trusting Terry McLaurin, people. I know it's not ideal. He's banged up. I will say, though, he was still getting open deep last week. Really didn't actually notice him playing at less than 100%, even though he was. And on the year, only guys with a higher percentage of their team's air yard share, Brandon Cooks and Jamar Chase. And McLaurin is also one of only 6 receivers with a target share over 30%. So it's not ideal, but McLaurin, just like Brandon Cooks, even if the quarterback situation isn't great, just far too much volume to bust here. So trust Terry. McKissic, don't be afraid to go down that route. Ricky Seals-Jones. If Gibson's active, we're going to trot him out there as this probably, top 20 back. And he's been that really. Last week was the first time he's busted in a while. So I don't want to just act like Gibson's useless if he's going to keep playing through the pain. Obviously not an ideal situation for pretty much anyone involved with the Washington football team this year, though. On a slightly more positive note, Dwayne, we got the Green Bay Packers, and I would like to think Davante Adams gets more than 5 targets this week. Call me crazy. I feel like it could happen.
Yeah, I'm betting the over on 5 targets. I don't bet the over on 5 targets for hardly anything, but I would bet the over for Davante Adams pretty much every week on the over for 5 targets. As far as the Packers go, just a couple of interesting notes here. They are favored, like you mentioned, by 9.5 points. So this could still be a week where AJ Dillon is good enough with all the bye weeks that we have to sneak in. I don't have him in my top 30, but he's right there on the cusp this week. So listen to this, Ian. So Dillon, he's really living on these leading scripts. When the Packers are trying to ice the game, which is also good news. If you're an Aaron Jones fantasy manager, Aaron Jones still has all the things you want. He still picked up most of the work from Jamal Williams in the passing game. It's just a lot of the running work, which we thought would happen anyway, from Jamal Williams is going to A.J. Dillon, but he's getting a little bit more than that because of the way these game scripts are working out. But if you look at in week 6, 48% of his snaps and 46% of his attempts came when the Packers were up by 10 points or more. So they're going to this 4-minute offense. They're just basically wanting the game to be over. But Jones, whenever the team, is in a close game or in a slightly trailing script or just slightly leading, not these big leads, 68% of the snaps, 65% of the attempts. So that's good for you long-term for Jones. This week, I do have Aaron Jones number 3. It is a week, Ian, where if we had all the other normal backs here, we've got Elliott gone, we've got Dalvin Cook gone, we've got J-Rob gone, we've got Eckler gone, we've got Najee gone. So it's really pushing. It's not the greatest matchup. You just mentioned Washington's good at, making those tackles, closer to the line of scrimmage than a lot of these other defenses. So it's not the best matchup in the world for Aaron Jones. But due to all the bye weeks, I do have him at number 3, and I've got A.J. Dillon sitting just outside my top 30.
Washington is still single worst defense in the league in scoring right now. If you look at some of the more advanced metrics like that, like their contested target rate, I don't think they are truly the worst defense in the league. Clearly, though, a below average group and nowhere near where we anticipated them being back in August. Cincinnati Bengals are at the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore sitting as a 6.5-point home favorite. Game total resting at 46.5. So cool thing I came across as I was doing my weekly quarterback predictions article, which you can find on pff.com. Usually get 100 to 300 words and at least one, usually more, really cool notes about every single quarterback's upcoming week. And with Joe Burrow, he is PFF's second highest graded passer this year when blitzed. Overall, he's 34 for 47, 6 touchdowns, and just 1 interception when blitzed, one of only 7 QBs with double-digit yards per attempt in these situations. Ravens happen to be the 3rd most blitz-happy defense in the entire league. So it's just interesting, Dwayne, because the Ravens were someone that I was, not someone, but just a defense, I should say, that I was very willing to write off literally this time a week ago until they play the freaking Chargers and shut down Justin Herbert and one of the best offenses in the league. So what group are we going to see? Are we going to see the one that let Carson Wentz and the Colts go for, over 400 yards and ring up 25 points in style against them? Or are we going to see the one that made Herbert and company look mortal for pretty much the first time all year? Like most things, I'm sure it's somewhere in between. But this could be the spot where Burrow actually is built to kind of take advantage of what the Ravens want to do best. So, Jamar Chase, we know we're starting him every single week. Upside wide receiver 2, that is only that low because of the volume concerns. But with all the buys, I wouldn't blame anyone for squeezing him in to that top 12 or top 10. You're starting him. Rank the guy wherever the hell you want. You're starting him.
T. Higgins and Tyler. Real quick on the Bengals, just a quick note there, as I was working on the utilization report this week, the Bengals, let's not hold our breath, but over the last couple of weeks, like we are seeing a little bit better pace, from them. They're 3rd worst right now in plays per game and dropbacks per game, but over the last 3 games, they ranked 22nd and 19th in plays and dropbacks. So it's getting a little bit better. I always want to keep an eye on the trends. They're throwing the ball 57%, so despite leading on 89% of their plays in week 6, they still threw the ball 57% of the time, or dropped back to pass 57% of the time, which before this, they had been more of like a 50-50 team in that kind of game situation. So we could see them starting to lean a little more into the pass, a little less into the run, and maybe picking up the pace just a little, not anywhere near what we thought we were going to get based on what we saw last year, but I think we could be taking some good steps.
On the year, dead last in situation neutral pace per Football Outsiders. Come on, guys. I just don't even get it, man. Last year they were 16th, and that was heavily impacted from Burrow being out. So that's good news, Dwayne. We want that to keep going in the right direction. With that said, look, if you have Higgins, you have Boyd, I understand you might just have to start them this week. Just realize, preseason stuff, we were looking at a 1A, 1B, 1C situation. Right now, it's looking clear-cut. Number 1 is Jamar Chase. Big step down. I would give T. Higgins definitely the 2A over Tyler Boyd's 2B. Maybe even want to go 1, 2, 3 with the group. Either way, Higgins and Boyd are going to be battling for those targets just a little bit more than Chase. Final note, Joe Mixon this year, 3rd in touches, also 3rd in PFF rushing grade. So the guy is really making the most of out of his opportunities on the ground. And, we'll see what happens with Chris Evans here as the backup. I do think at this point, That's so tough to say, actually. Samaje Perine versus Evans is tough because we saw Perine come in and get the featured role when Mixon was playing at less than 100%. But man, oh man, like if Samaje is not going to carve out any sort of standalone value, if Chris Evans keeps keeping on as a receiver, particularly what he can do when they line him up out wide, I wouldn't be shocked if by the end of the year, Dwayne, we see Mixon kind of having more of the role he had last year with Evans actually being the Giovanni Bernard complement. And if you ask Evans, and we've seen him say this in interviews, basically the coaches just had him watch every single snap Giovanni Bernard has taken over the past few years, or at least in 2020, trying to get him right for that role. So it's just a development. I think we talked about this yesterday on the waiver pod, but yeah, you should be feeling pretty good if you have Chris Evans in Dynasty. Probably nothing too serious in 2021, but the rookie has been very exciting to watch. So loving Joe Mixon, loving Jamar Chase. Could be a sneaky good spot for Burrow based on some of those blitz numbers. With the Ravens, Dwayne, we got Latavius Murray maybe dealing with this ankle injury. Even if he's out, though, what the hell are we doing here? This is way too muddled.
Yeah, it's not a bad matchup on the ground. And this last week, we did see the Ravens, get into a leading script, and they ran 21 personnel for 40% of their plays. So if you're looking at the utilization report this week, and you're like, man, all these receivers and tight ends, their routes are down. It's because they were in blowout mode. They were just basically trying to get the game over. And so that really helped make sure that each one of these guys ended up scoring, and they ended up coming through in some way, shape, or form in fantasy. So number one, I don't know that you can count on that sort of game script, from week to week. I do think that Cincinnati's a good enough team that this could just be a very competitive game. Cincinnati could be leading. So that's a factor. Number two, I just have no clue, Ian, what they're going to do with the three guys. There's nothing in the utilization that says any one of them has a certain role. They're just literally mixing them in. So for all we know, really, they're just approaching it like it's this hot hand. Le'Veon Bell does get a little bit more of the work in the passing downs. You do see a little bit more of the short down and distance for Latavius Murray. But even that can be kind of wobbly. It doesn't always stick, from week to week to week. So it's a really tough backfield. The biggest takeaway is, look, it's four backs, because Lamar Jackson's 1A. And then you got the other three guys, and none of them are very good. It'd be one thing if one of them was explosive, and we know that, Williams has really shown the most explosiveness, but he's done something evidently with the coaches where they don't really trust him. So I think the best case scenario, Ian, would be if Latavius Murray is out, that Williams gets his chance again and actually shows them and does whatever the things are you and I can't see or we don't know that are going on film. Like, he takes care of those issues, cleans them up, maybe eventually takes over half of the backfield. As far as the receivers go, Marquise Brown, I know a lot of folks are kind of worried, Ian, right now. It's really interesting. And I love Rashad Bateman. He's a feature part of the utilization report this week. So you can go check that out. It's up now. But Marquise Brown, man, he was just a couple of inches from having another touchdown catch last week that would have made his box score look a lot better. He continues to stretch the field. He's grading out really well. He's performing the best he's ever performed in his career. He's out there for the most routes. He's out there for the most snaps of all the receivers on the team. And we're talking about a team with Lamar Jackson that's throwing the ball 10% more. They're on pace to throw the ball 10% more than last year. They're throwing the ball more in every single game script, trailing, close, leading. It could be a confluence of different things that are coming together to really create this scenario. One, they don't have any backs. But number two, they've been investing in these receivers. They've been investing in the passing game for the last 3 years. So I think it's kind of like the perfect storm that's come together. But I think we'll continue to see this team throw the ball more. And so Marquise Brown, if for some reason, you've got one of those, fantasy managers in your league that's kind of like, yeah, Rashad Bateman's here, Marquise Brown's going to be a low-end wide receiver 3. I don't see it, not with the way things are working. And I don't expect Marquise Brown to have 150 targets. I think he's going to have about 120, but I think he's still going to be in the top 18 receivers when the season's over.
Very good points all around. I mean, Lamar Jackson last week, 167 yards. Before that, 442 and 316. This is not, your grandpa's Lamar Jackson. The guy is throwing for yards much more often this year. And as Dwayne's telling you, it's coming with an increase of volume, which we can always get behind. Panthers at the Giants. Carolina sitting as 2.5-point favorites. Game total is at 43. So I mentioned the prayer yard stat before. Again, both DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson in the top 5 receivers and basically missed opportunities that we can conclude were the quarterback's fault. So not going too great for Mr. Darnold. There's a lot of reasons why this offensive line hasn't been doing him too many favors. We also had 8 drops last week, which I believe was the 6th most in a single game over the past 10 years. So I get it. Not fully on Darnold by any stretch. Also not always helping his cause as well. Like with a lot of these things, I don't think Darnold was exceptional last week. Also wasn't as bad as some people made him out to be. I mean, we see the talent. That throw to Ian Thomas down the seam, I think, was maybe the single best throw of the week. Just one of these things where, not quite the guy we saw in the first 3 weeks of the year. Also not as bad as the guy that we saw with the Jets for the last 3 years. So focusing more on the usable fantasy pieces. I think DJ Moore gets to James Bradbury shadowed, but I'm really not worried about this one, people. Bradbury is at his best against, Cortland Sutton, Josh Gordon types, just the bigger body receivers that are going to box you out and just go win. DJ Moore, I don't know if there's a cornerback in the league that can check this guy for 60 minutes without safety help, let alone Bradbury, who we've seen CeeDee Lamb take advantage of, and other guys, Terry McLaurin, throughout this year. The route running technicians can just give him a lot of problems. So no downgrade at all for DJ Moore. And for Robbie Anderson, man, it's just a matter of when he's actually going to get this spike week. Dwayne, we were calling him a buy low. Hell, he might be a freaking pick him off the waiver wire at some point, depending on what kind of league type you're in. Yeah,
he's out there in 30 to 40% of leagues when you look at ESPN and Yahoo. When I was writing the utilization report, I was like, whoa, yeah, he's going to pop, and it's going to happen soon. These drops can't keep happening.
Last 3 weeks, 11 targets, 7 targets, and 11 targets. McCaffrey's not coming back, and Terrence Marshall is in the concussion protocol. So Robbie is a good player. I know he had the drops last week. Would not be shocked if this is the week that we finally see him get that boom back into things. So DJ Moore is anyone's idea of an upside wide receiver 1. And truly with Robbie, boom or bust, wide receiver 3 that is due for a boom after doing a lot of busting. Quickly on Chuba Hubbard. Last 3 weeks without McCaffrey, PPR RB36, and then without Rodney Smith involved, RB16 and RB22. So again, removing Rodney from the equation gives Chuba all that pass down work. We still see Royce Freeman for a chunk of snaps per game, but Chuba has earned weekly upside RB2 treatment, and I would not be shocked at all if he is in the top 12 ranks this week with Buy Armageddon on hand. And yeah, man, one of the big quotes to come out of this week, Matt Rule, a lot of people consider him and Joe Brady kind of at the forefront of a lot of these good offensive things happening around the league, but man, wants to quote unquote, shout out ETR, establish the run a little bit more often, which, would be good news for Chuba. I don't think it'd be good news for the Panthers, chances of winning football games, but in fantasy land, we'll take the volume when we can get it. And looking at this stretch, man, they have a week 13 bye. I'm not saying McCaffrey is going to be out all the way until then, but you look at the schedule. This week, Giants 26th in PPR points per game allowed to running backs. Next week, the Falcons are 23rd. Patriots, Cardinals, those are 2 top 12 teams. If McCaffrey's still out, though, we get the football team in week 11 and the Dolphins in week 12. So a lot of good matchups here for Chuba to potentially eat. And again, he's got a nice little floor without Rodney involved. So please, you better have a damn good reason for leaving Chuba on the bench for pretty much as long as McCaffrey remains sidelined. Now, Dwayne, we got the Giants. We heard earlier before this podcast, Kadarius Toney not expected to suit up, which absolutely sucks. He was just becoming such a joy to watch each and every week. Still got some options, though, still. Shepard's back. Devontae Booker's got a big role. Saquon stays sidelined. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I mean, for Toney, look, we just want him healthy because, just for the few plays at the beginning of that game, I mean, I went back and watched him, and I'm just like, this guy, man, he's got something really special about him. I don't know what his career is going to end up looking like because all sorts of weird stuff can happen with these players, but he's a player that I definitely want to see have the opportunity to just be healthy and see what he can do. But yeah, we'll just have to keep an eye. I think you mentioned on the podcast yesterday the reemergence of Dante Pettis. So Pettis kind of flashed, when he was a rookie with San Francisco. And then, he got in the doghouse like Brandon Ayuk has, with Kyle Shanahan. You get in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse and look, I can't do anything for you. We're just podcasters. We can't do anything, Dante. But maybe you can revive your career enough to put something on film here. But yeah, Sterling Shepard's really the big story, Ian. If you look at him in the 3 games that he's completed, PPR finished 9, 22, and 17, and he clearly stepped right back into that role. He's Daniel Jones' most trusted advisor, confidant, safety blanket. I don't know. pacifier.
Advisor.
You can call it whatever you want, but Daniel Jones and Sterling Shepard, they probably have lunch, brunch, dinner more than Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp. Like, these guys got to hang out all the time. They may have bunk beds right next to each other.
When it's time to do taxes, Daniel Jones talks to Sterling Shepard before he talks to his wife.
Exactly. So Shepard, he's in a good spot. You know, I've got Shepard sitting right now. Again, this first pass, just was working on this before the podcast. I've got him at wide receiver 18 this week. We do have quite a few folks on bye. I think he's really more of a I think of him more as a wide receiver 3 for the rest of the season, but he'll definitely have those wide receiver 2 weeks. But for this week, you know, he's right there in that mid wide receiver 2 range. And I think that's really where he belongs, despite the fact that, you know, we've got low implied points for, you know, the Giants. But, you know, the Giants can end up being, you know, it's not a blowout looking situation like what we had last week with the Rams, right? This could be a close game with them in Carolina, and it can end up being more of a shootout than what we think. So with Daniel Jones, the other thing is just don't forget, you know, he has had several really good performances this year. The thing with Jones that, you know, is really the key, like, to his fantasy success, you know, ultimately he needs to get his weapons back. But if you look at his, you know, work in the design rushing attempt, you know, game, 14%, that's 5th in the league. He's also got the 8th highest scramble rate in the league. This last week, he only scrambled 2% of the time, but we'll be 2 full weeks removed from the concussion. So I expect Daniel Jones to be out there, you know, really doing his thing. Is he really a great NFL quarterback? You know, I don't know. I think he looks better than he has, but I tell you this, he can be a good fantasy quarterback. So this week, he will be inside my top 12. Right now, I have him at number 11, Ian.
Yeah, the thing with Daniel Jones last week, as horrific as that was, he wasn't that bad to start the year. We were calling him Danny Dimes, Danny Vick because of all the things he was doing there. It was quite literally our worst graded PFF game of the year from a passing standpoint among all guys with at least 25 pass attempts. So, hey, Carson Wentz just had the single best game of the year in PFF passing grade. Do you expect him to do that again? No. Do we expect Daniel Jones to be the worst quarterback in the league again? No. So just again, remember, week to week league, 1 week at a time. Don't hold it too far against these guys if you can help it. Falcons at the Dolphins. Atlanta sitting as 2.5-point favorites. This has swung. It opened as Miami favored by a point. People came to their senses, and now we got the Falcons up 2.5. Game total resting at 47.5. Calvin Ridley missed last week, personal reasons. He is back. Could be the get-right week we've been hoping for if, and even maybe if not if, Xavier Howard and Byron Jones remain out of the picture. But, hey, we saw Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, and Chris Godwin have no problem with these guys, even when they were healthy. So I don't think, you know, banged-up versions are going to be able to get in the way of Ridley. He just needs to get on the same page with Matt Ryan. And we were so ready for the breakout to happen in week 6, or they were just on bye. So, whatever. Last time they're about to play, literally like the most unrealized air yards we could have asked for. So they're close. We've seen Matt Ryan play a lot better over the past few weeks compared to how he started the year. And if you just look at pure expected fantasy points over fantasy points, so like which guys have the largest difference in fantasy points and expected fantasy points, our guy Robbie Anderson and Calvin Ridley. So Ridley, the usage is there. We just need him to produce. And like Robbie, even more so, we have seen Ridley be a great player in the past. So prime buy low candidate if you can go get him. Because again, this time next week, I don't think we're going to be able to get him quite as cheap as you could right now. And hey, we all know Cordero Patterson, stud among stud, king among kings. Don't sleep on Mike Davis maybe having a nice little bounce back here. He has not been that bad this year. First of all, tied for 5th in total forced missed tackles on the season. And you look at what happened in their last game in London before. So in week 4, Mike Davis, it looked like he was maybe starting to lose some work to Wayne Gallman. We saw him active for basically the first time all season. He was actually looking okay. What happened in London, though, Gallman went back to being absolutely nothing. So if they're going to stick, which is not guaranteed, but if they're going to stick with Mike Davis as the lead early down guy, Cordero Patterson playing this, you know, cool hybrid running back wide receiver hybrid thing, we're still looking at Mike Davis getting around 15 combined carries and targets. We're just kind of writing him off because he hasn't had a great start to the year. Well, maybe this Dolphins defense could be where it all comes together. They've had a week to get better. We got Miami coming back from London, which is kind of crazy. I thought they were guaranteed a bye coming back from another freaking country. But you look at what they've allowed this year on the ground. Week 1, Damon Harris goes for 100 yards. Week 2, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss combined for over 100, 3 touchdowns between them. Peyton Barber, everyone, including mostly John Gruden's favorite running back, 111 yards and a touchdown. Week 4, Jonathan Taylor, 103 yards and a touchdown. Leonard Fournette goes for 67 and a touchdown. Most recently, James Robinson, 73 and a touchdown, only on the ground. So, Mike Davis, if you need to start someone this week because of all these damn buys, I think you could be doing a lot worse. Obviously, my guy CPAT, upside RB2 at worst. You see the, I think it was FanDuel pricing, Dwayne. Cordero Patterson's like right up there with Hopkins and like top 5 at the position. I love it, man. My guy getting the respect he deserves, but yeah, probably going to regress just a little bit.
Well, it does also show you, I mean, this is a crazy week. Like, I mean, looking at my rankings right now, I'm like, I got Darrell Henderson number 2. I've got DeAndre Swift 6. I got Leonard Fournette at 7. Darrell Williams is freaking 9. Like, James Conner's in my top 12. Like, it's a crazy week. It's a crazy week I love these kind of weeks, though, to be honest. Like, these kind of chaos weeks where, honestly, I think, like, for the folks that really do dig deeper into the data, there can be, some different edges, that you can get in a week like this. So it's the kind of week I like for DFS purposes. As far as the Dolphins go, Tua, had his first game back last week. And he ended up, his grade actually came up, Ian, from where they originally had it, after the game, and it didn't look too terrible. I know whenever you and I were first recording on Sunday night, it wasn't looking too good for Tua. I know he did have some bad plays on the game, but man, here's the big thing with the Dolphins, and this is all you really care about for fantasy. When you're dealing with a team that's really not that good. Obviously, you'd love to have Tom Brady's team with all his weapons. Tua doesn't have that, but the pass volume environment is good. So if you look at the Dolphins and trailing scripts, when they trail by 4 or more points, they're plus 12% passing versus the NFL average. When they're in close games, that means they're within 3 points. They're plus 5% versus the NFL average. Whenever they're leading by 4 or more points, they're plus 14% versus the NFL average. This team wants to throw the ball all the time. There's a little bit of self-inflicted pain here. They do rank second as far as facing 3rd and 4th down with 7 or more yards to go. So that means they're struggling a little bit on early downs. And what's interesting, Ian, is when you look it up and it kind of like makes the whole thing seem weird. That's how these numbers work some of the time. They're actually like 52% run on 1st down and 10. Like, what? We're like, they have like 8 carries a game. Do they only have like 16 first downs a game? Like, what the hell's going on with this team? It's a situation where they're having to throw the ball a lot. A lot of it is by design, though. We know we heard them talk about it all offseason. Look, they were going to be trying to get the ball out quick, but they wanted to get vertical, get it down the field, which brings me really to my second point. If you look at our guy, Jalen Waddle, Tua, when he's with Tua, he has 9.1 ADOT. When he has Jacoby Brissett, a 3.8 ADOT. So on the season. So that's good news, for Jalen Waddle. The other thing with Waddle, man, that's really interesting, he's the second. If you look at the league and you look at receivers that get moved around right at the snap to try to free them up, to give them, more space to work with, help get them a target, he's second to only Chris Godwin. 19% of his receptions have come off of motion at the snap. So they are doing things with Waddle. Now he's getting to work a little further down the field. It is an upgrade at quarterback. So I didn't give Waddle like a full upgrade. I want to see another game of this. I already had him as a mid-range to high-end wide receiver 3, depending on matchup. So I've still got him there. But this week, he's definitely going to rank inside of that because of all the bye weeks. If I look at him right now, I've got Jalen Waddle number 26 in my rankings. I could see him sneaking into the top 24. There's a couple names like right there in that same range that I could end up liking Jalen Waddle over. As far as the backfield, you guys don't need me to tell you anything. It's complete madness. I'm sorry. Anything you can do. If any one of these players has a breakout game, I don't care if it's Myles Gaskin. Hopefully you did it last week when Myles Gaskin had his big game. You just got to unload him because, life's too short to worry about the Dolphins' backfield. That's my philosophy. Life is too short. I actually may just take it out of the utilization report and I may just put like a little placeholder. It'll just be the section formerly known as time spent talking about the Dolphins' backfield, but we're just not going to talk about it anymore.
Josh Hernsmeyer would do that with his air yards model where eventually he would just have redacted. In place of who it should be. But yeah, don't look now, people. Well, I guess I am looking. But Jalen Waddle, wide receiver 26 on the season. Might just be a wide receiver 2 before everything is said and done. We got the Jets coming off their bye against the Patriots in Foxborough. New England sitting at 7.5-point favorites. Game total is at 43 points. Again, check out the waiver wire pod with Dwayne and I for more thoughts on Michael Carter, but we really think he is the best running back ad of the week. A lot of the other guys, Dearness Johnson and those types, Yeah, they are better options for this week. But again, if you want someone that could give you the sort of RB3 floor with upside for more for the rest of the season, not just a week or two, I do think that Michael Carter is that guy, pal. So otherwise, Zach Wilson, please take care of the ball a little bit, man. Right now, we only have 4 quarterbacks with at least 10 turnover-worthy plays, and Wilson is in this group despite already having a bye right there alongside Trevor Lawrence, Sam Darnold, and Big Ben Roethlisberger. And adding to the issue, Zach Wilson, 7 big-time throws, fewest out of that group. Not good when you're in a group with Ben Roethlisberger and you can't get more big-time throws than the guy. I see the flashes. We're 5 games into his career. Not writing off Wilson just yet, but man, tough to say anything good about the guy at this point. It just really has been brutal to watch. Yeah, I can pick out 4 or 5 throws from the year that look fantastic, but we need just some sort of baseline consistency. This is why the Jets are the 32nd ranked scoring offense in the league. So Michael Carter, RB3. After that, Corey Davis, and you're just praying that you're going to get one of the good weeks. Started off the year, overall wide receiver 5, all the victory laps on Twitter about the steal that he was in these late rounds. After that, wide receiver 89, wide receiver 52, wide receiver 7, and then back down to wide receiver 51. So it's just so muddled around him and such a low upside offense. I think Corey Davis is the only receiver that you can start with even a semblance of confidence in this one. And I think that about wraps it up here. I understand Dak Prescott and Davis Mills even these past 2 weeks have had a lot of success against the Patriots. Maybe the Jets coming out of the bye can add to that group. Just not, one of those bets that I'm going to act on with any level of confidence. With the Patriots, Dwayne, I will say, hand up, I was not ready to crown Mac Jones to start the year. Just absolutely miserable as a deep ball passer. I'm still not crowning him in my best Dennis Green voice, but he did look a lot better against the Cowboys than we've seen previously.
Yeah, man. I mean, I watched obviously every snap of that game. I thought he showed good anticipation. He and Jacoby Myers, Jacoby's eventually going to score a touchdown. It's going to happen. But they're on the same page. I don't know what they're doing with Jonnu Smith, though. It just puzzles me. 2 of his targets were on wide receiver screen type plays. I'm just guys, come on. There's better ways to use Jonnu Smith. Really, Hunter Henry has kind of taken over. He's separated. He was in the route 77% of the time last week. So Hunter Henry is really, the tight end to be rostering. But if you look at the Patriots overall, there's a couple things, that are concerning. Now, last week they were just super efficient. But if you look at them over the last 3 games, they're now only averaging 53.3 plays, which is second worst in the league over that span. The run volume is really poor. So despite the fact that, Damian Harris can be a solid, player, when he's splitting with 2 other backs and they just don't get enough volume, you really need him to punch in the touchdown. Now, they do run the ball third most once they're inside the 5. So once they get down there, they do love to give the ball to Damian Harris. But I'm just kind of keeping an eye on that volume because early in the season, we were seeing a bit more up-tempo, a bit more hurry-up, things that were showing us, okay, maybe there can be enough volume here. We don't really have anyone elite in the offense, but maybe we could have 1 or 2 weapons be viable because we're running enough plays. So like I said, last week it did work out because the Patriots ended up being very efficient, hitting some big chunk plays against the Cowboys. As far as the skill positions go, I already talked about Harris, but Ramondre Stevenson, just know he did see a little bit more work last week in the passing game, but it's because they never used the 2-minute offense, which is what I was just talking about. So Brandon Bolden, he had his snaps go down, and Stevenson's went up because Bolden really owns the 2-minute offense. And so when they didn't use that, there were more first and second downs. The Patriots were just not in long down and long distance very often. The Cowboys, especially after the first half, they were just giving up too many yards on first and second down. So it just wasn't a Brandon Bolden game. Worked out a little better for Ramondre Stevenson, but I think Stevenson is really a tough start, Ian. I really believe that Damian Harris is the only guy you want to be using. I think break glass in case of emergency, fine. You can throw Stevenson in there. If it's PPR, I'd probably still slightly lean to Bolden, assuming that these last 3 weeks don't mean that the 2-minute drill's gone forever from New England's playbook, which I wouldn't think. It's probably just something that has more to do with the game scripts that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. As far as the passing games go,
Dwayne, real quick on freaking Harris, it reminds me of honestly the Darrell Henderson game when we really knew the backfield was his. He was coming into the game less than 100%. We had seen Sony finally get some run, and what happened? Henderson still dominated. Last week, Damon Harris came into it questionable. He had the rib injuries. He had lost another brutal fumble the week before. What happened? He completely dominated usage. And I would note, when Stevenson got that goal line touchdown, that was because Harris hobbled off before.
Harris pulled himself off, yeah.
And Harris came back in for overtime. So we'll see. He might be limited throughout the week in practice. But yeah, Stevenson, maybe an emergency spot start, but we are not anticipating a takeover by any stretch of the imagination. Back to you.
Yeah, no, I think, where we are with Harris is we're hoping, he can get 60 to 70% of the rushing attempts. Yeah. But I don't know yet, because the 2 weeks before even, he's at 44%. Then we had the Houston game where we know he was hurt, only 45%. Now last week we saw 67, but he was playing really well against the Cowboys. And the Cowboys, their interior defensive line, you can just blow them up right there. And Leighton Vander Esch is a side-to-side linebacker. He does not want to plug the hole. Neither did Jalen, which is why Jalen's gone. So I guess it's all eyes on Micah Parsons every single play now.
Yeah, just real quick. I think we just need to throw out those Saints and Buccaneers games, honestly, because they just did not want to run the ball. And we brought up before, Washington, Saints, Buccaneers. Those are your clear-cut top three run defenses in terms of just being able to get the guy down closest to the line of scrimmage, the goal of playing run defense. So I do think that Harris should be a low-end RB2 more weeks than not, but that's enough about the ever-evolving and ever-frustrating Patriots RB.
Yeah, you say all that just to call him a low-end RB2. Come on, Ian. Come on, you're going to have to go stronger to the hole with it. No, the only thing I'll say, it's a little different than Henderson just because he's not getting the 2-minute work, not getting the long down and distance work. He's truly the early down back. So he is getting most of the early down work, but he's not like a Henderson or some of these other guys just because he's missing out. Now, I think the good comp that you gave would be Leonard Fournette on a lesser offense. That's really what you have here. You have Leonard Fournette.
It wasn't so much a comp to Henderson, more so if we were going to see Sony take over, it would have been that week. If we were going to see Stevenson take over, it would have been last week compared to this week.
Gotcha. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So we won't spend any more time. People are like, God, you guys are still talking about the Patriots. Yes, we are. And I'm sorry, but Jacoby Myers, look, targets 28%, 18%, 32% over the last 3 weeks, 25% target. Look, you can be in a really crappy offense, an average offense, a below average offense. Whatever you guys want to call the Patriots right now. You can read my utilization report to say where I grade this offense, but it's 25%. On the season target share. So good things are eventually going to happen for Jacoby Myers. He's ranked right now at wide receiver 34. That's probably about, maybe a little below where he belongs, but I would say, he's an early 30s type guy, but he is eventually going to have one of these weeks in where we're going to be like, oh man, Jacoby Myers, wide receiver 8. And this could be the week for that to happen. Not a great matchup, but we have a lot of other really good receivers on bye.
Yeah, at some point in his career, you'd like to think he'll catch a touchdown. Have one last week, of course, got nullified.
You know what's going to happen. It's going to be 3 in one game.
A man can dream. Eagles at the Raiders. Las Vegas sitting as 3-point favorites. Game total is at 48.5. Jalen Hurts has had 10 career starts. Here are his QB finishes. QB 11, first, 12th, 20th, and 3/4. Thank you, Nate Sudfeld. Had to say your name on this pod as we do every week. 5th, 10th, 4th, 11th, and most recently 6th. Since Jalen Hurts took over in Week 14 last year, here are the total number of players and just their names in particular that have more rushing production fantasy points. Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, David Montgomery, Alvin Kamara, and Ezekiel Elliott. That is it. 6th among running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers, whoever the hell you want to say, in fantasy points from rushing production. It's just absolute madness. Even ahead of Lamar Jackson in this stat. Is Jalen Hurts Lamar Jackson as a rusher? No, but when he gets these touchdowns, when he's running more frequently than Lamar, it does actually put him ahead. So Jalen Hurts continues to be a top 5 quarterback. And, as bad as he was in that Buccaneer game, we always see this happen, man. Every single Monday and Thursday night game, the opinions are just magnified because everyone is watching these guys. And, they're not watching the Eagles every week. And I don't blame you. I'm not telling you to go grind Jalen Hurts film. It's not this great time. But just realize, he's not this incapable passer. And that's why you should not be afraid to start Devontae Smith in this one. Again, it sucked last week. It was supposed to be a smash spot against the Buccaneers. I get it. But even that defense, despite how banged up their cornerback room is, we talked about this a little bit with the Broncos and their potential having just no chance with the pressure. I think that was the bigger issue. Because remember, this Eagles offense, they made do against the Chiefs without 4 offensive linemen, but that has been a big issue for them in past weeks. So Lane Johnson is back. He's missed the last few weeks with some mental health stuff. he's back in the equation, and I think that should help the upside of this passing attack. So again, style points do not matter in Fantasyland, people. We've still seen Jalen Hurts clear 300 freaking yards in 4 of his 10 career starts. So don't be afraid to go back to the well with Devontae Smith. We're loving Jalen Hurts, and I guess we'll put in Miles Sanders this week because you probably don't have a better option too. So the usage is moving in the right direction for Miles. The problem is he's just the RB2 on his team, clear cut behind Jalen Hurts. So the snaps are going up. Even rush attempts are looking better than they have in the past. And he did well with the opportunities against Tampa Bay of all teams. It's just a matter of, will this persist, or are we going to see another 2 to 5 rush attempt duds? So Miles Sanders, I want to say low-end RB2, Dwayne. That sounds about right, but maybe I'm just calling everyone a low-end RB2 with the way things are shaking out this week. But
I think for Miles, this week, yes. I got him as 21 this week.
There we go.
Which is kind of saying something. You'd think he'd be higher, but I did give him an upgrade today in the utilization report. I did call it a slight upgrade, so I had to qualify it. It's almost like your low-end RB2 comment. I'm like, look, it's an upgrade. I have to give it to him because I downgraded him 3 weeks ago, and since then, his utilization has gone up. And that's the point of the utilization report, is to look at the underlyings. The problem is, if you look at the last 4 games, the Eagles have trailed 90% of all plays. So they're already a pass-heavy team. Then they're trailing, and then you mentioned it, inside the 5, it's the Jalen Hurts show, not Miles Sanders. But outside of that, he's doing what he can do. He's getting more snaps, getting more rushing attempts. He's really reduced Kenneth Gainwell's role. Gainwell still gets most of the 2-minute offense, but other than that, Sanders is handling pretty much everything. He's eventually going to have a game. It's like I'm more confident than I've been all season in Miles Sanders, but it's still kind of in meh territory.
That's how I feel. It's like, okay, at some point it'll work, but he's going to need to hit one of those home runs, and he's capable of doing that. We saw it last year. We'll see when it happens. Final note, Dallas Goedert. Dwayne, I think the only guys at tight end you would start over him this week, Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts, end of list, correct?
Yeah, I think the Goddard, Fant, Hawkinson is the tier where you could say any one of those 3. Right, could finish in the top, but I've got Kelce, Waller, Andrews, and Pitts over. I've got Goddard at 5 right now.
That is more than fair. Gotta love that. We've been waiting a long time for this Dallas Goedert in a Zach Ertz-less offense, and we are finally here, people. Dwayne, what's going on with the Raiders? It seems like maybe, just maybe, we got a new usable weekly piece in Henry Ruggs.
Yeah, we might. Derrick Henry, man. Derek Carr last week just came out I was so excited, Derrick Henry's game last night, but 12.6 yards per attempt, whereas the 2 previous, he had played well to begin the year, but then week 4 and 5, 5.8 and 5.9. Average depth of target last week, 11.8. The Raiders were really pushing it, down the field. And to your point, a big part of that is Henry Ruggs. If you look at Henry Ruggs, his average depth of target over the last 3 weeks, 22.7, 15, 24.5. It's 18.6 on the season. 26% of his passes come on play action. Ruggs is right there. His routes now over the last 3 weeks, he had been down in the 60s and 70% range over the first 3 weeks, which is okay, we just can't do anything with this. 83%, 87%, 87%. We need him to get up to 90% and stay over that. But because he has this big playability, and he really only needs 1 or 2 catches to pay off for you. Now it can be very hit or miss. Ruggs is getting to a spot where he could be playable in deeper formats, but the bigger thing we're looking for is, can he take one more step forward, Ian, and just get more consistent with the targets? They're still bouncing around a bit. His targets per route run sitting at 16%. Not terrible for a player as young as he is, but we want him to push that up over 18%. We'd love it to get around 20%. It's still second on the team, or third on the team, really. You've got Waller sitting at 21% targets per route run, 22% Hunter Renfrow. And the reason you folks hear me say targets per route run is because it's really the equalizer. We're only counting, targets for the plays that the receivers are out there. So it's just giving us a little bit of insight that, okay, what if the player's role expanded? Could they potentially, with more routes, score more fantasy points? Obviously more routes, no matter where they are in targets per route run, is going to equal more fantasy points, but we're looking for the guys that are kind of sticking out. So Ruggs isn't quite to that area of sticking out in targets per route run, but he's pretty close, and he could still take a step forward. So yeah, he is a player that I like. Looking at it this week, again, the running back field is very thin. I've got Josh Jacobs right now at running back 13. He was borderline my RB12. And again, this is still early in the week, but pretty solid. Our running back's strength of schedule with a plus 6.7, which is about probably 6th or 7th on the slate this week. We've got quite a few good matchups, but that's still a really positive number. Against the Eagles, you've got a competitive game. So it's a situation where I do think you can fire Josh Jacobs up. If you look at him over the last couple of weeks, honestly, it's kind of like what we talked about with Damian Harris, but honestly, utilization standpoint, better. 81% of the rushing attempts, 71% of the rushing attempts, 64% of the rushing attempts. He's been out there on a route over 54%, 43%, and 50%, which really, before we've seen Jacobs really down like in the 30% ranges as far as his routes go. So now he's sitting around half. Now, the 2 previous weeks, he did get targeted quite a bit, 17%, 14%. Last week just really wasn't the week for that. He is still giving way, long down distance, 2-minute offense, but he is getting the early down work. They're staying ahead of the game when it comes to long down and distance, which is really, they've done a good job with that. So they're not one of the teams that's immediately behind after first down. So that keeps Jacobs on the field longer, and he can be in passing routes, and then that ultimately leads to more targets. As far as Kenyon Drake goes, you've just got to bench him. I know he finished as PPR running back 8. Now I haven't updated as of Monday night. Total fluke, folks. Only 20% of the snaps, 16% of the rushing attempts. Only out there for 20% of the routes, because guess what? Jalen Richard's a human being too, and he has feelings, and he needs to be on the field 15% of the snaps each of the last 2 weeks. Been out there for 17% of the routes each of the last 2 weeks. So if you look at week 4, you saw what? Kenyon Drake, 35% of the snaps, 39% of the routes. The next week, he falls to 18% of the snaps and 20% of the routes, because where did they all go? They all went to Jalen Richard. So you can't use Kenyon Drake. He's honestly in smaller formats. He's droppable because he's not even the handcuff to Josh Jacobs. The handcuff to Josh Jacobs is Peyton Barber. There's really no point in Kenyon Drake right now in fantasy football.
Kenyon Drake played 12 snaps last week and had 6 touches. Like, that's
Thank
what
God
we're looking at.
they paid him that money. I don't get it.
Oh, man. At least a few of my best ball teams got that 1 week out of him. We can thank Kenyon Drake for that. Lions at the Rams. Los Angeles sitting at 16-point favorites. Game total is at 50. Jared Goff has never won a game not coached by Sean McVay, which kind of sounds right when you think about it, but just to kind of hear myself say that, sheesh, Jared, come on, man. Gotta do something for yourself at this point. DeAndre Swift, though, is basically the only guy we can start in this offense other than TJ Hawkinson with any level of confidence. Only trails Najee Harris and Derrick Henry in expected PPR fantasy points this season. We have Swift at 40 targets, Najee Harris at 46. No other running back has more than 31 targets. So we just don't see running backs with Kamara not getting these targets, with McCaffrey, sidelined. Right now, Swift and Najee Harris are the closest guys we have to those usual cheat codes as pass catchers. So you're starting Swift everywhere in this spot. I understand Jamal Williams has given us some flex value, but this is worst case. This is a game that they can get down by a lot early. And what happened last week could happen again, where Swift ends up really dominating usage because he is their 2-minute, their come from behind back if they are going to be playing an extreme negative game script. So, hey, Jamal, maybe he'll convert, one of his 8 to 10 touches into a short score. But, I feel a lot better about that role when it's James Conner in the freaking Arizona Cardinals offense, not whatever the hell the Lions are putting out on a field on a week-by-week basis. Only other note, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8 targets, 7 targets over the past 3 weeks, at least 5 catches in every single game. So we have heard Goff talk about wanting to get Amon-Ra Brown more involved here and moving forward. I think he might catch a lot of Jalen Ramsey in the slot. That's where the Rams use him a lot this year. But at the same time, I think the nature of his targets should help him avoid that being too big of an issue for him compared to maybe some other just more true number 1 slot receivers. So Amon-Ra, if you're really desperate for some wide receiver help, I would hope you don't need to go this far down, but I do think he's someone that you can at least go out there, get over 5 targets, and you can live with the results from there. Only tight ends with more expected points than TJ Hawkinson this year: Kelsey, Waller, Andrews. Usage is fantastic. Continue to start him with confidence. We saw him get back to really a good performance last week. Could have been even bigger with a better ball from Goff on what could have been a nice little chunk touchdown for your boy Hawkinson. That's enough with the Lions. I won't expose everyone to another 20-minute ramble about a terrible offense for the most part. But Dwayne, Los Angeles Rams. When you said Aaron Jones was your RB3, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking because when I was looking at Henderson, writing him up, I said the only two running backs I would start confidently ahead of him this week are Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara. You said, screw that. It's only Derrick Henry. Darrell Henderson, RB2. We're here.
Man. Yeah, I've got Darrell Henderson RB2, and I feel great about it. Like when I look at his utilization, like there's nothing in the profile, like other than could he get hurt? Yes, but we can't predict that. Does he get hurt? It's seemingly more than other players. Yeah, until he doesn't, and we saw him last week in the similar kind of game script that we're going to get to this week. And I think everybody was pretty happy with Darrell Henderson last week. RB5, on the week, probably RB6 after Monday night. So yeah, I love him. 81% of the snaps, 66% of the rushing attempts, 80% of the routes, 10% of the targets, 86%. And this is the key stuff. 86% of short down and distance. Owns that role. Inside the 5, 100% of the attempts. Long down and distance, 71% of the roll last week. 2-minute offense, 100% of that roll last week. So there's really no game script situation that can take Darrell Henderson out. Like he's like that old song, ain't nothing gonna break on my stride. Like that's Darrell Henderson without killing everybody with some singing here. Like nothing's breaking his stride right now. He looks great. The only thing that can get him, is if he gets injured. I pray to God like the social media team doesn't do anything with what just happened on the air.
You got a better voice than that, Dwayne.
Yeah.
Come on.
No, yeah. We'll break out the guitar for that song at some point. But yeah. So Matthew Stafford, man, I've got him in my top 6. Quarterback strength of schedule, number 10 overall. They are favored by 15.5 points, so he may have to throw all of these touchdowns in the first half. But it's just, and again, it's the nature of the slate, but I've got him in the top 6 this week. I've got him right behind Jalen Hurts. You've got Lamar Jackson, Mahomes, Murray, Brady, Hurts, because Hurts refuses to score under 25 fantasy points ever in any fantasy football game. Then I have Matthew Stafford, and I've got Aaron Rodgers sitting right there. So pretty excited about Stafford. Look at Cooper Kupp. Wow. Wide receiver strength of schedule, 10 out of 10. Perfect. Wide receiver cornerback matchup, 99.6. Robert Woods obviously gets that same wide receiver strength of schedule, a 70.4 on his wide receiver cornerback matchup. And again, this is based on PFF modeling this out to look at, okay, who do we expect to be on these receivers for what percentage of the time? So this is a cumulative grade and the wide receiver cornerback matchup tool that you can go see on the site yourself. Pretty cool thing to look at. And then tight end. Man, Tyler Higbee's funny, Ian. Like he's one of these guys. Look, if he continues to play as much as he is, he could be like one of the few people ever to break these rules that I've been talking about all year as far as the tight end, which is to be out there over 80% of the routes. Now, look, it's on him. The targets per route run they're not there. They're not where they need to be. He needs to get those up around 20%. He's sitting around 14%. Here's what I'm going to say about Tyler Higbee, though, Ian. Like, it's coming. I can't say that it's going to be consistent. I'm not saying once he does it, it's going to happen every week. But he's out there enough in enough routes in an elite offense that there's eventually going to be some defense stumble their way into having Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp covered at the same time on the same play. It may not happen a lot, but it's eventually going to happen. And Tyler Higbee's going to have a huge week. Like, it's going to be coming. Like, and this could be the week. His tight end strength of schedule is a 10 out of 10. Look, it's the Lions. You get 10 out of 10s across. You get a 10. You get a 10. You get a 10. It's like Oprah giving out cars, I mean, it's the Lions, All these, weapons have great matchups this week. They can't obviously all hit, or can they? They could. All I'm going to say on Higbee, I love him right now as far as DFS. It's hard to trust him every single week, right, in your week-to-week lineups and your season long. But in DFS, like I'm telling you guys, like it's coming. He's going to have one of these weeks where it's going to be 2 or 3 touchdowns. And if you get the rest of your, some portion of your roster right, like it's going to be a huge differentiator because people are fading Higbee like crazy right now in DFS. All the underlyings are there. He just needs the targets, and we've seen him do it in the past. It's not like we've never seen Tyler Higbee not be a good fantasy football player. We know that he can be. You just got to get the right equation.
It's a great point where in DFS particularly, we're going to see so much ownership on Henderson, on Kupp, on Woods. Higbee could be the
great backdoor play into this game.
Absolutely love it. And loop it back around with Swift or Amon-Ra St. Brown. Absolutely love it. Bears at the Buccaneers. I haven't seen enough of the Tom Brady holding up the four fingers meme yet. People, get on it. I want to see that everywhere by the time Sunday goes around. Dwayne, I've already got my scheduled tweet for daylight savings time in a couple weeks where it's like me when it's 3 o'clock today and it's Brady holding up the four fingers. So I'm ahead of the game, Dwayne. We're already looking ahead weeks on the old Twitter sphere. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Anyway,
chess, not checkers, Ian. Chess, not checkers. You're thinking multiple moves ahead. I know you.
Tampa Bay, 13-point favorites. Game total was at 47, down just a bit from 49. So here's the thing, and it's similar to kind of Teddy Bridgewater against the Browns. It's not the Browns secondary. It's not the Buccaneers secondary I'm worried about. I don't know if these quarterbacks are going to have enough time to take advantage of this pass defense because Justin Fields this year, whoa, buddy, the worst quarterback in the league under pressure. It has been miserable, and a lot of that is his release time. He is 31st among 38 quarterbacks in quickest release time. But man, if they can get even close to him, it's just been miserable. PFF passing grade among 39 qualified quarterbacks. Dead last when pressured. Big time throw rate, 29. Turnover worthy play rate, 34th. Yards per attempt, 36. Adjusted completion rate, dead ass last. QB rating, 37. So, you know, you would like to think this is the week they try to throw the ball against Tampa Bay because Lord knows nobody can run on them. 89 rushing yards before contact on 98 carries against Tampa Bay, people. Less than 1 yard is absolutely bonkers. And just two running backs specifically, league low marks in rush attempts, rush yards, and rush touchdowns alike. So again, the cornerback room is terrible. I get it. But the two big assumptions we need to make here if we really want to get behind Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, one, we need Nagy and Laser, whoever the hell is calling the plays these days. We need them to actually take a step forward and let Fields do more. Far from a given, even though we've seen other teams do that against the Buccaneers. As we know by now, the Bears aren't necessarily as smart as other teams. And also, we need Fields to get better in a situation where he's likely going to be under a lot of duress against the league's 12th best defense and pressure rate. And honestly, I think they're even better than that. I think that their pressure numbers are a little bit reduced because of how much teams constantly pass against them to begin with. So, yeah. Moral of the story, not really liking anyone involved in this passing game, and not really these running backs either, Dwayne, because Tariq Cohen is eligible to come back this week. I don't really think he's going to be back. I think we would have gotten an update on him moving around better, but it's possible. And Damian Williams could also be back. He spent last week on the COVID list. We're not sure how he's feeling. I hope Dame is doing much better, but if he's healthy, he's perfectly eligible to come back in action. And just realize, Khalil Herbert, great last week, and he's been performing great all year. I took a cool stat today that was not yards after contact per carry because I think that can get sometimes skewed. A running back breaks a tackle at the line of scrimmage, runs 60 yards for a touchdown. You got 60 yards after contact right there. So I basically took every running back's total rush attempts and then looked at who has the highest percentage of rush attempts with more than 3 yards after contact. So the top 5 RBs, and I use a 25 rush attempt cutoff. Number 1, Tony Pollard. Number 2, Khalil Herbert. Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, Ezekiel Elliott rounding out the top 5. So again, small sample for Herbert, but he's got 40 carries on the year and he's really made the most of them. So if Tariq remains sidelined, okay, Herbert, you're going to be hard-pressed to leave him out of your RB1 range because of how freaking involved he was last week. True every down role. But if either Cohen or Dame come back, now we're pushing them down to, guess what? Borderline RB2 territory, low end RB2, whatever the hell you want to call it. So it's the Chicago Bears offense, people. I know we had higher expectations for them. I know there's some talent there. Ultimately, they're averaging 16.3 points per game, 30th in the league for those counting at home. On a more positive note, Dwayne, I don't know, there's so many mouths to feed in this Buccaneers offense. Brady manages to do it. Start everyone.
Yeah, you just start them all. We don't have to spend a lot of time, but great matchups across the board. Wide receiver strength of schedule is an 8.1, which is the second strongest on the slate. You got Mike Evans at an 84.2, Antonio Brown at an 85.1 in the wide receiver cornerback matchup. And guys, don't forget about Chris Godwin. This stuff, all is going to come back around. We don't really know who's going to be the odd player out. Antonio Brown has been red hot the last 2 weeks. I love when the Bucs have a primetime game because everyone claims whichever Buc receiver's going off, this is the guy I've been saying he's going to lead the Bucs every week. No, he's not. Brady's going to go wherever the coverage dictates, whatever the game plan is. The last 2 weeks it has been Antonio Brown. He's not on the field as much as the other two, but man, targets per route run are really great. I actually put Antonio Brown as a sell high, in my utilization report this week, not because I don't like Antonio Brown or think he's doing good things. It's just that I know it's going to level out over the course of the season between the three receivers. So if you've got someone in your league that thinks they've got to jump on the rest of, the planet, and they know that Antonio Brown is the top option for sure the rest of the way in Tampa Bay, well then, yeah, go trade him. See what you can get for him. Don't give him away. We have to always say that, Ian. Don't give him away. So there's two things you learn on, this podcast today. Is that an RB2 is really an Ian Hartitz RB. A low-end RB2 is now what I'm going to call in the utilization report as a Hartitz RB. That's going to be the low-end RB. Number two, the passing game for the Bucs, very diverse. One last note, though, just on Fournette. I know I said I wasn't going to say much, but they're actually a good offense. I have so many bad offenses I have to cover. I at least want to cover Fournette real quick. Did give the long down distance and the 2-minute offense back to Gio Bernard over the last 2 weeks, but it hasn't really mattered much. Ian, you talked about it 2 weeks ago. Number one, Ronald Jones is not involved at all. Number two, no team faces less third and fourth downs and 7 or more yards to go, meaning they're staying ahead of the down and distance. They're staying in situations where the complete playbook is staying open more than the rest of the teams in the NFL. The Bucs are only facing that kind of situation 13% of the time. The bad teams are facing that. Chargers, regression caught up last week. 20% of the time, the Chargers are facing that kind. Not saying the Chargers are a bad team, but that was one kind of thing, just kind of subtly underneath, all the greatness that was going on, with the Chargers. And Josh Hermsmeyer actually wrote an article about it, that, hey, there's probably some regression due in that area. But with the Bucs, that's not a problem. They stay ahead of the down and distance, keep themselves in really good situations. And what that does for Fournette, that's keeping his routes up around the 50% mark, despite the fact that he's not getting the long down distance and the 2-minute offense. We'd love to see that at 65 or 70%. But look, man, 50 to 60%, and last week 69% of the rushing attempts. So if you're going to get between 55 and 65% of the rushing attempts each week, which is about where I would, if I had to estimate Fournette every week, if I was the one doing our PFF projections and responsible for that, that's the range I would put him in right now. And then if you're going to get 8 to 12% of the targets, which I think is about his range on targets, and you get to play for the Bucs, man, it's just, you're going to be a mid-range RB2 in full slates. And a slate like this weekend, Ian, I'd be curious if you've even thought about where you're putting Fournette, but I have him at 7 right now.
Bro, I was just going to say, when I was doing my breakdown, I like these expected points because it just removes some of our biases with big plays and things like that. Just lets you focus on the usage. Leonard Fournette, the overall RB4 in expected points this year. And I said, wait a second, how's that possible? Like, isn't he not getting enough pass down work? The dude is 5th. He's tied with Cordero Patterson in receptions among all running backs this year at 25. More than Aaron Jones, more than McKissick, more than Kareem Hunt, more than all of these guys, man. Yeah, he's dropped 3 passes. Najee Harris has dropped 5 passes. We don't lose points for drops in fantasy football as long as they're going to keep giving him this workload. Dwayne, yeah, we are looking at an every week RB1. Even once guys come back, man, I think Fournette's going to be harder and harder to keep out of the top 12. We could have an overall RB1 ceiling if Giovanni Bernard wasn't involved, but just the fact that Rojo has become such a shell of himself usage-wise is all we really need to see for the artist known as
And you bring up a really good point,
Leonard.
like a bigger point there, like another Hartitz lesson in this podcast. You find a person in your league that likes to talk about drops, you found a good trade partner. That's the person to go target with. Go buy those players that they think, drops matter. Like, drops are just not sticky. We've just seen over time. Yes, there are players that have better hands than others. That's not what we're saying. But overall, a lot of it ends up being noise. So when you can find things like that and you hear other league mates that get hung up on things like that and talk about them all the time, then those are the types of folks to go target in trade scenarios, because whenever things like that crop up that aren't typically sticky, but you can use it to your advantage in a negotiation because they're either going to be too low or too high on a certain player.
And I think like Fournette is just example A, or example 1, whatever the hell you want to call it, of like how much more important it is for your receiving workload to not have this mobile quarterback. I mean, you see Tom Brady just go through. You watch Brady just go through his progressions, and it's like he knows before the snap that like maybe he has like one or two receivers with a chance. Within a second, he's already decided that he can't get them the ball. And there's Leonard Fournette just for an easy 8 yards that you can go get 1.8 fantasy points for, because our full point per reception scoring remains pretty ridiculous if we're trying to measure what happens in real life. So, Dwayne, I'm happy we spent more time on like an actual good offense there with the Buccaneers.
Well, I feel kind of bad for you. Like you get the Texans now. You had the Bears before that and the Lions. There's been a couple of weeks I felt things were bad, but now like it's the cosmos, like everything is even back out. Like it's yin, the yin and the yang, and like it's back to even, because Ian this week has had to do the Bears and the Texans and the Lions as 3 teams back to back to back. Are you awake? Are you alive?
I was wondering, man. I felt like a little off after our like first 45 minutes on here, and it's just like, no, I think I just got the real shitty teams to talk about. So thank you, Dwayne. Texans at the Cardinals, Arizona, 17.5-point favorites, game total of 47. Once again, not too much to say here, people. Brandon Cooks this year, though, again, he's just the only guy in this offense that we can truly get behind. Wide receiver 22, wide receiver 8, wide receiver 11. Yeah, 2 letdowns outside the top 50. Comes back last week with the wide receiver 18 performance. So on the year, if we have a guy like Cooks, just like, honestly, like he's not that different from Terry McLaurin at this point. I think McLaurin is the better real life player. I'm not even trying to say that. But hey, Cooks is someone that, 4 teams with over 1,000 yards. I'm not trying to put him down either. But when we have this much volume, all these other concerns just really go out the window. There's just too much here for him to consistently bust. 6 receivers have a target share of at least 30% this year. Cooks joins Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, DJ Moore, and Terry McLaurin. You're never even considering benching those guys. I know it's not the exact same when we have the Houston Texans and Davis Mills, but we need to give Cooks more of a benefit of the doubt here. As long as he continues to be featured this heavily, and it's even more ridiculous with the air yard share. Tied with Jamar Chase at 51%, only 2 players in the league with over half of their offense's air yards. So it's all there. Arizona Cardinals, 2nd worst touchdown rate allowed to opposing wide receivers this year. Similar to the Buccaneers and the Browns, I do think their pass rush helps hide some of the deficiencies in this offense, and we could see that, kind of rear its ugly head this week. But it's Brandon Cooks, people. If we get 12 targets, they don't need to be that efficient for us still to get plenty out of it. So Cooks should be someone ranked inside, I think, your top 24 this week, because there's not that many guys that we can put ahead of him from a pure volume standpoint. So enough on that. Dwayne, once again, man, here's one of the best offenses in the league. Go off. Talk about whatever you want. You can talk about anyone.
I'm frozen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we could.
You can hear me? Okay, sorry. It was showing. It looked like it was showing I was still mute. My bad. So as far as the Cardinals, looking at Kyler Murray, nobody needs me to tell him anything about Kyler Murray, so I'll focus just more on the backfield. I do have James Conner inside my top 10 this week. You kind of touched on him a second ago, Ian, and you mentioned, rather having James Conner, in the role in the offense, right, that he's in, than what you have Jamal Williams playing in the wrong offense, Detroit. So James Conner, sometimes it's just a matter of you get lucky and where you land, Ian. And so, or maybe you're smart enough to know where to sign. And James Conner did that. So get the Texans this week. You get an 8.1 running back strength of schedule. That's going to be 3rd best on the slate. You got a plus 39 offensive line run blocking advantage, which is probably about 6th or 7th, just eyeballing it really quickly. But it's a situation where, 17.5-point favorites, like this is a perfect setup, for James Conner. You still got Chase Edmonds, could be nursing a shoulder injury. So I just see it being a game where by the halftime, man, they're going to be ahead by so much. You could see 2 touchdowns for James Conner just in the second half alone. Looking at the receivers, really over the last couple, this is not really good, right, for the Cardinals. We have great matchups here, but we don't have a situation where, they're just going to have to keep the foot to the gas. And they've shown us, over the last couple of weeks that if it is a situation where they don't have to throw the ball all that much, they won't. They'll continue to run the ball, and they will continue to spread the ball around. Hopkins is still the 1A in the offense. I do believe that his games are coming. He gets a 7.1 on the wide receiver strength of schedule, and 86.5 in the wide receiver cornerback matchup. So the matchups are really great. It could take just a couple of plays here, Ian, for Hopkins to really do things like we saw last week. he ultimately had 7 targets, but 4 of them were wiped away by plays that didn't count. So it looked like he only had 3 targets in the box score, where he had 55 yards, but he also had 2 touchdown receptions last week. So we could see something similar this week where you could have Hopkins go off for a couple of touchdowns. He'll be inside my top 12 this week because, again, we've got a lot of teams that are on bye week. I just don't know that the Cardinals are going to have to throw the ball that much, going into the second half. They'll basically, if they just don't want Kyler to be bored, they decide to throw it around a little bit, they will. Or maybe the Texans make it a game. I just really doubt it.
What about Chase Edmonds here? We got James Conner ranked that highly. How come Chase Edmonds, in your opinion, shouldn't be up there right there with him?
Yeah, and I have Edmonds still in my top 15. It's just what we saw this last week was they got out to such a lead that Chase Edmonds only played 4 snaps in the second half. So I think we'll have to watch the practice report. If we see Chase Edmonds come out and be full this week, then I would have more confidence in really probably pulling Conner down a little bit and pushing Chase Edmonds up. But when we look at the 4-minute offense, when we look at the leading game scripts, that is really where James Conner does get more involved, and he handles more of the carries once the Cardinals are into that situation. So that's where I just lean a little bit more to Conner in this particular game because we got a 17.5-point favorite. Again, if he's a full participant, I'll feel better about him, and I still have him at RB15 right now, and I've got Conner at 10. But they could get closer together depending on what we see on the injury report.
Very fair. I was just making sure we didn't have a huge drop-off going there. Man, Edmonds last week, for those that didn't catch that game, I thought he was going to get that first touchdown of the season. He got shot out of a cannon into the secondary. Didn't quite have enough long speed to find his way to the end zone, but still picked up 40 yards. He's had a couple of those just huge runs this year where he makes the guy miss, just can't quite find the end zone. Oh my gosh, this is so sad. I just refreshed this. So most touches this year without a touchdown. I've looked at this every single week, and usually there's a kind of a good chunk of guys kind of close to each other at the top. We have Chase Edmonds with 79 touches and 0 touchdowns. Miles Sanders at 75 and 0. All the way down to Salvon Ahmed at 28 touches and 0 touchdowns. What the hell? There's not even a player with 30 touches and no touchdowns. And we got to go up into the 70s to get Sanders and Edmonds. Absolutely ridiculous. That just pisses me off. Sometimes I see these stats and I just get mad, man. That's all it is. Before we move on to Sunday Night Football, I just wanted to say right now you can get 25% off any PFF subscription if you use code FANTASY. Grades and data are live for every single player who logged a snap last week. Go check out the highest graded players from week 6 with code FANTASY. Dwayne's utilization report, my wide receiver cornerback column, running back column, all of our rankings, all of our locked article content, strength of schedule goodness, our grade power projections and cover probabilities, DFS utilization tool, DFS rostership tool, all of that can be yours and get 25% off the PFF sub. All you got to do is use code FANTASY. If you just want to support the pod, use code FANTASY. Go get that PFF sub, and we will greatly appreciate you. And also, NFL fans hungry for a big win this week, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, has you covered. New customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game, and if they do, you win $200 in free bets. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. It's that simple. As we talked about with some of these spreads, bet on the Cardinals or Rams. Do yourself a favor if you want to take advantage of this promo. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF. Bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game and win $200 in free bets if they win. You win with promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Min $5 deposit, $1 wager, one per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Also, whether it's football success or financial savvy, the right questions help set the stage for winning strategies. Western and Southern is teaming up with PFF's very own Chris Collinsworth to share insights that can help put you ahead on both your fantasy and financial scoreboards. Want to hear about Chris's old playing days or behind the scenes with Al on Sunday Night Football? How about a need to know for your financial future? Now you can ask about either or both, and every football or financial question you ask earns you a chance to win a catered party for February's big game, aka the Super Bowl. Check out the Chris Collinsworth podcast and Western Southern's Instagram for answers to the best questions each week. Submit your questions at westernsouthern.com/askchris. One more time, that is westernsouthern.com/askchris. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the link in the description below. And finally, everybody, it's football season. You know what that means? It means we're going for two here with the sponsor of today's show, Manscaped. Listen through hairs has never been easier. It's time for you to join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code PFF at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. Again, 20% off and free shipping. What a deal with code PFF at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code PFF. Sunday Night Football, we got the Colts at the 49ers. San Fran sitting as 4-point favorites. Game total resting at a fairly low 44. Carson Wentz, PFF's single highest graded game of the season as a pure passer in Week 6. The highest graded game of his career, actually. Before that, we had the nice performance against the Ravens as well, putting together some great performances. So shout out Carson Wentz. And really the big thing for me, man, we saw the deep ball ability, dimes to Paris Campbell and T.Y. Hilton downfield. To me, with Wentz, even last year, like there were flashes of him. I remember that Ravens game where Miles Sanders led touchdown bounce off his hand. Like the receivers that the Eagles had last year were a complete train wreck. I mean, Travis Fulgham was like we were loving that guy because he was the only guy producing. Like, I'm not trying to hate here on Travis Fulgham, but the fact that he was the savior for this passing game for like a month tells you all you need to know about the guys Wentz was throwing to. So he didn't lose the ability to create some good plays. He just couldn't stop getting in the way of himself with mistakes. And he's fixed that this year. Only interception through 6 weeks was a fluky shovel pass that like Jack Doyle got tackled against the Rams before he could even have a chance at it. So great stuff. Only Kyler Murray and the Cardinals have posted a higher catchable ball rate on passes thrown at least 20 yards downfield this year. So Carson Wentz, again, there's never been really a question about the talent. He can make the throws you want him to make, shows off some really great off-script ability. He's someone that I understand, like when people say, like, oh, you were higher. How could anyone ever be higher on Carson Wentz than Dak Prescott? You must have been such an idiot. Like, Wentz has put awesome plays on film, even outside of the 2017 MVP. No, he's not a freaking machine like Dak Prescott who knows what to do each and every play. Who is a machine like Dak Prescott, though? It's been great to see Carson Wentz get closer to becoming the guy that we saw in 2017, 2018. He's not quite there yet. It's still just a 2-week sample, but it's good. Like, why would anyone want Wentz to be bad? The more good quarterbacks we have, the more fun fantasy is, and the more fun it is to watch these games in real life as well. The star of the show, though, Jonathan Taylor. You guys were upset. He started off the year PPR, RB11, comes back RB41, RB37. Last 3 weeks, though, RB10, RB2, and RB3. Now, the usage still isn't great. We have Marlon Mack going out there. It's taking away his 3 to 5 carries, taking away 15 to 20% snaps. But hey, Jonathan Taylor, if he keeps being this generational talent, quote unquote, and just really balling out like he's, a middle-class man's Derrick Henry, whatever the hell you want to call him, he will make the most out of this usage. Not the best matchup against the 49ers, but when we have someone with Taylor's home run ability, you don't need me to tell you that he's locked in as an RB1, someone that should be starting in lineups of all shapes and sizes. For now, Mack, Nyheim Hines, I don't think that they're people that you can start with any sense of confidence, and even holding them at this point. Hines, I think, in deeper leagues, you should still probably hold on to, because if Mack gets traded, then we're back to the 2 running back committee. But with 3 guys there, it's just so tough. And honestly, even holding on to Marlon Mack, hoping for a trade, where could he really go where this actually works out? Like the Chiefs, the Ravens, I guess. Like there's a couple teams where I guess if they went out on a limb and said Marlon Mack's our guy, we'd have to get behind him. But just realize you're pretty much betting on a trade that hasn't happened yet, and you're hoping that he goes to like 3 teams where otherwise he's not going to be worth any more than he is at this second. Finally, Michael Pittman, nice bounce back potential here with Paris Campbell on injured reserve and T.Y. Hilton looking at least pretty iffy. I don't know why this is like seemingly getting ignored in a lot of the discussion about his comeback around the industry, because he didn't return after he got hurt. Frank Reich said it's not serious. The Campbell one was serious and they put him on injured reserve. With Hilton, it's not IR serious, but Reich also said, we're going to reevaluate this in 48 hours and see what it says then. So it doesn't sound, the opposite of serious to me either. Something to definitely monitor, because if Hilton's there, it's one more mouth to feed that Wentz is seemingly okay enough doing. So I still think Pittman in the spot, particularly with all the buys, you're going to have a hard time ranking, more than 25, 30 receivers ahead of him. Just realize his ceiling gets a lot higher if we can take out Hilton and already Campbell. Things just are condensed that much more. Dwayne, it looks like Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be under center. Trey Lance was not at practice Monday. Little bit unsure. If we have Trey, we're getting the rush attempts. I think we can probably assume it's going to be Jimmy G, though.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like so far. We'll have to continue to monitor it, but we didn't have Lance back. We've also got a couple of other folks returning to practice. You've got JaMychal Hasty, so it could be a situation where we have Trey Sermon as inactive, because that's really the equation that we had early in the season. For Sermon to be inactive, we had Elijah Mitchell as the lead back. You had JaMychal Hasty really more as the scat back, the passing down back, and then you had Juszczyk out there as a fullback. So I'd also expect a decrease in the role for Juszczyk if JaMychal Hasty is active. I've got Elijah Mitchell at running back 17 for the week, right behind Damian Harris. He could move up a little bit. You've got a good offensive line run blocking advantage in the game. It's a 55. That's going to be fourth or fifth best right now, based on where we are. We'll upgrade with injuries later in the week on the site. But a 1.7 overall running back strength of schedule. So it's kind of a mixed review as far as the matchups go for Mitchell. Not a huge implied point total, but not a bad one on the slate. It's about neutral, 23.75 points implied for the 49ers against the Colts. Deebo Samuel is the primary guy you're going to talk about in the receiving game. You just got to see dog bark. Deebo Samuel, fire him up.
Deebo Samuel week, let's go.
60.6 wide receiver cornerback matchup, above average wide receiver strength of schedule, and just a player that's generally getting everything funneled to him. And we're going to be without George Kittle again this week. We know that Brandon Ayuk has not been out there for his usual complement of snaps. That's something we can obviously be monitoring coming out of the bye. Does Ayuk finally climb out of the doghouse? We'll have to wait and see on that. But Samuel is a player that I've got inside my top 12. I've got him as my wide receiver 11 right now on the week. Ian.
Finally, everyone, Monday Night Football, Saints at Seahawks. New Orleans up to 5-point favorites, opened at 3.5 game total. Again, at 44, not great, but compared to some other games, not terrible either. It's Alvin Kamara. That's pretty much it in this offense. So why not end with the freaking Saints for me, Dwayne? I couldn't have run any more cold with these offenses I get to talk about. So Alvin Kamara, it's Dwayne's got Henderson ranked too. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but Alvin Kamara, you'd be hard pressed to name. If you really wanted to use two hands to rank the amount of running backs you want to play over Kamara, I think you're just kind of being a dick about it, because despite the targets not quite being there, he did get 8 last week. They've had a bye week to get this around, and it's not so much like, it's honestly more like the DeAndre Hopkins type thing, man. Like, it's not even as much that Kamara has been displaced. More than anything, it's like just been a volume issue, because Jameis, for the first time in week 5, threw the ball more than even 23 times per game. So that's why it's so hard to get behind Callaway, to get behind Deontay Harris if he's going to be okay from this hamstring. Troutman, Juwan, all these guys. When there's only 23 passes to go around, you just can't go into the game saying, hey, Jameis is going to throw 4 or 5 touchdowns on these. I understand he's pulled that off, but if you're going to be trying to predict that on a week-to-week basis, you're going to be a losing man sooner rather than later. So it's only Kamara we can feel good about. Hopefully the targets do take a turn for the better. And again, it's not as horrendous as maybe we made it out to be to start. The 8 targets did help last time around. First 5 weeks of 2017, first 5 weeks of 2019, he had 31 targets in those years. This year he's at 22 in that stretch. So just 9 removed. And hey, would we be that shocked if we start seeing him rip off double-digit target games? I don't think so. So Alvin Kamara, at a minimum, we're getting all the rush attempts to make up for it anyway. So we've talked about him being someone to sell high on. We're talking selling high as like a top 3 RB. Someone's going to trade you like Devontae Adams type of high here. You're perfectly content to have Kamara still holding down that RB1 spot more weeks than not, particularly against the Seahawks defense that is 4th worst in PPR points per game allowed to running backs. Dwayne, actually, I was complaining about the Saints. You got the burden here. What the hell is going on with Seattle, man?
Yeah, man. Geno Smith. It's just it's not a good equation. We're not going to have the 300-yard passing games every single week on minimal volume. So the Seahawks are going to have to change something, right, around their equation if they think they're going to make this work with Geno Smith. But I think they just want to try, to protect him. So given all of that, looking at the backfield, they're trying to use the backs. They're trying to keep the running game going. So Alex Collins was injured late in the game. We don't know how bad it's going to be. He's got a hip issue and a glute issue. He could play. He may not. But you are getting Rashad Penny coming back, and he's evidently, quote unquote, raring to go. So he's ready to get out there. So it could just be a complete committee For now, I'm assuming Alex Collins is going to play. I do have him in my top 30 in my rankings, but I'll probably be adjusting that. Even if he's just questionable throughout the week and even if he isn't a game time decision, but he's just limited and they're like, he's going to play, I'm going to assume that it's really going to be he and Penny splitting more of the work on the early downs. And then you'll probably have DJ Dallas working in there on the passing downs and maybe Travis Homer because he plays some special teams as well. So we'll have to keep an eye on who's active. Just note, though, Rashad Penny in the past, we have seen historically, we've seen points where he actually has served as the receiving back for the Seahawks. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch because if Penny does manage to carve out some of that role, but then also is sharing time, in the early down role, that could really make him the back to really want to target for as long as Chris Carson's going to be out, which right now I think is anyone's guess, right? Chris Carson, is he going to be back in 3 weeks? Is he going to be back, next year? We don't know right now. It's just a complete guess. As far as the receivers go, man, it really does hurt them, but it's hard, Ian, to go too far down on the players just because, again, we've got a slate where we've got a lot of different really good receivers, that are missing. When you look at taking, 2 really good receivers from Dallas, pulling them out of the slate. 2 good receivers from Minnesota, pulling them out of the slate. The Buffalo receivers are out of the slate. The Charger receivers, that's 2 good receivers. And then even the Steelers, you got Deontay Johnson. And if Claypool were to be healthy, that's another 2 top players that would be typically in our top 30. So, you're looking at a lot of receivers that are off the board. So I've got Metcalf right now sitting on the cusp of my top 12. And I think it's hard to not put Metcalf in there, even with Geno Smith playing quarterback. I'm a little lower, though, on Tyler Lockett. I've got him down at 19th overall right now, which isn't terrible. And the matchup is not bad, for DK and for, Tyler Lockett. DK's got a 75.0 wide receiver cornerback matchup this week. That's going to be in the top 10. You look at Tyler Lockett, he's got a 64.8. That'll be in the top 15. So I think they're still viable plays. It's just, man, there's just not the top. There's not the ceiling that we knew. At any moment, Russ could come up with that 400-yard passing game and throw 5 touchdowns. We know that's really out of the equation, unless it's just a complete fluke right now with Geno Smith. So we're going to depend. We need more volume. We need more receptions. We need more targets, and the offense isn't giving it to us. So now we're trying to thread this efficiency needle that's always worked with Russ with less volume, with less efficiency from a lesser quarterback, and it scares me. And you're just betting on the talent. You're saying, look, DK Metcalf is too good to not put in my top 12. Tyler Lockett is too good to not put in my top 24. But the quarterback situation really does hurt.
I can't believe Lockett is pulling this shit again. Week 1, 4 catches, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 2, 8 catches, 178 yards, and a touchdown. Since then, 4 straight performances under 60 and scoreless. I know Russ isn't there, and that's obviously making a tremendous impact. It's just frustrating. We back up Lockett, rank him high. You just want some semblance of consistency, not quite getting there. Only thing I'll add, DK Metcalf, you just got to ride with it. And I'm a big proponent of you don't let individual cornerback matchups, perceived tough shadow dates, cause you to bench someone. Marshawn Lattimore, if he gets out of this matchup, primetime Monday night, we saw Jair Alexander really make that leap into the upper echelon of cornerbacks last year. I think Lattimore's close. Saints paid him a ton of money when people were wondering, is he really worth it? So far this year, Dwayne, he's only shadowed twice. Week 1 against Devontae Adams, 5 catches, 56 scoreless yards. And he took Terry McLaurin in week 5, 4 catches, 46 scoreless yards. I'm just saying, man, if we can get a graphic out there that shows McLaurin, Devontae, and Metcalf getting locked up by Marshawn Lattimore,
he's gonna need to renegotiate his contract already.
Might as well. It's been interesting, man. You've watched every Cowboys game for decades. You probably remember him really getting the better of Amari Cooper a couple years ago. I know.
Oh, dude, I know his Mike Evans matchups are what really put him on the map with me. I know, and it wasn't just because of the fighting. Those guys are hyper competitive with one another. But and just an ability. He's shown in the past to have the ability to really get inside the opposing receiver's head and shut down some of the better wide receivers in the league. And look, you're right. The matchups, a lot of it can end up just being noise, which is a cool thing. Why I like the way we do the tool now, which is more based off of, look, we know you're not just going to be shadowed by this one player. But at the end of the day, it's I think you put it best. like in podcasts previously, you talk about the tiebreakers. Like if it comes down to a tiebreaker, and it's more of a tiebreaker in a DFS scenario. If you're playing season long, you're starting DK Metcalf, right? In DFS, it's one of those things where if all of a sudden everybody gets afraid of the cornerback matchup and you all of a sudden see, DK is going to be lowly rostered, well, then that makes you actually want to use him. That's not going to be the scenario here because that's going to be a Sunday night game. So, you see DK in pretty much every lineup, whenever you're playing the Sunday night, slate. But yeah, I think it's a good point with Lattimore. He has played really well.
And yeah, he got beat in the past. You know who else got beat in the past? Jair Alexander, Carlton Davis. All of your top shadow cornerbacks go through some bad games because they're being asked to travel with the number one receiver on the other side. So if Lattimore does get toasted for 100+ yards and a touchdown, just take it easy before sending your garbage can gifs because a lot of lesser cornerbacks aren't being asked to have that sort of responsibility in the first place. Dwayne, we have reached the conclusion of this edition of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. You are going to Nashville this weekend, my friend. The people are not going to be hearing from you until our waiver pod next Tuesday. Anything you want to say? It's going to be a while, man.
No, man. I mean, I'm excited. We're thinking about going, so maybe we will end up at the game, and we will be there and available for that at that moment, like to see Patrick Mahomes and Derrick Henry. That'd be pretty cool. So yeah, we're going to see a concert on Friday night. We're going to see a guy named Jason Isbell. So we're really excited about it. My wife loves Nashville. We're going with a couple of friends. So yeah, you guys, all I'll say is good luck. Hope everybody smashes this weekend.
Love it. Have a great time, Dwayne. I hope the missus does as well. Nashville, I just went the first time in August before the season started. Lovely city. And yeah, man, go check out that game. What's the worst that could happen? For Dwayne, I'm Ian. Thank you as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.